In room 304 of St. Augustine's Hospital, where the antiseptic air clung to every breath and the fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of restless thoughts, a 12-year-old girl named Maya Jackson sat sketching the sunrise she might never see again. Her frail hands, darkened by melanin and bruised by 4 lines, danced across the page with a pencil that trembled but never faltered. Terminal leukemia had claimed her future, metastasizing through her bone marrow with ruthless precision. Yet her eyes, bright as the dawn she drew, refused to surrender their light. 2 floors below, in the outpatient wing, Henry Carver, a 58-year-old man with skin as pale as the charts documenting his chronic emphysema, shuffled toward another appointment he resented. Life, to him, was a ledger of losses, a failed engineering career, a divorce that left him estranged from his son, and lungs that wheezed betrayal with every inhale. Fate, that cruel orchestrator, was about to stitch their threads together in a tapestry neither could foresee, a collision of despair and defiance that would rewrite their endings. The hospital corridors smelled of bleach and resignation, a labyrinth Henry navigated with a scowl etched deep into his weathered face. His pulmonologist had ordered another round of spirometry tests, forced expiratory volume readings that confirmed what he already knew. His lungs were a crumbling fortress, scarred by years of smoking and self-loathing. Irritated by a wrong turn after misreading a sign, he found himself on the pediatric oncology ward, where laughter, improbable and piercing, spilled from an open door. Maya's voice carried a melody, soft but unshaken, as she sang a tune she'd invented. Sun comes up, shadows flee. I'm still me. Oh yes, I'm free. Henry froze, his cane tapping the linoleum like a metronome of discontent. He peered through the windowed door and saw her, a wisp of a girl, bald from chemotherapy, her hospital gown dwarfing her skeletal frame. A nasogastric tube snaked from her nose, delivering nutrients her ravaged body could no longer process naturally. Yet she smiled, at nothing, at everything, as her pencil scratched a horizon ablaze with color. Hey, mister. Her voice jolted him. She'd spotted him, her grin widening as if he were an old friend. You look lost. Juan Nakomin? I've got stories. Henry grunted, adjusting his oxygen cannula with a trembling hand. I don't do stories, kid. I'm Busse. Busy frowning? She teased, undeterred. Come on, just 5 minutes. I bet I can make you laugh. Against his better judgment, perhaps drawn by the absurdity of her persistence, he stepped inside. The room was a chaos of crayons, paper, and half-finished origami cranes, a stark contrast to the sterile gloom beyond. Maya patted the chair beside her bed, her foreline swaying with emotion. Sit. What's your name? Henry, he muttered, sinking into the seat, the plastic creaking under his weight. And you? Maya. Nice to meet you, Henry. Why are you so grumpy? He bristled, the question poking at a wound he'd nursed for decades. Life's not exactly a picnic, kid. You wouldn't understand. Her eyes, wide and unyielding, met his. Try me. Henry didn't intend to stay, but Maya's questions, simple, disarming, kept him rooted. What's the worst thing that's happened to you? She asked, her tone more curious than prying, as she adjusted the pulse oximeter clipped to her finger. He exhaled sharply, the sound rasping through his nasal cannula. Lost my job years back. Wife left me. Son hasn't spoken to me in a decade. Now my lungs are shot. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, they call it. Pick one. Maya nodded, absorbing his litany of woes with the gravity of sage. That's a lot, she said, then paused, her gaze drifting to her drawing. I don't know if I'll see you tomorrow. The doctors say my leukemia is refractory, means the chemo's not working anymore. Bone marrow's too far gone. But today I woke up and there was a bird outside my window. That's enough for me. Henry stared, his cynicism faltering. Refractory leukemia, an oncological death knell, a term he'd overheard in waiting rooms. The cancer had outmaneuvered every alkylating agent and corticosteroid thrown at it. Yet here she was, waxing poetic about a bird. You're dying, and you're happy about a bird? Not dying today, she corrected, grinning despite the pallor creeping into her cheeks. Living today. Tell you what, let's make up a story. I'll start. Once there was a little bird with a broken wing. She spun a tale of resilience, her voice weaving a fable about a sparrow lifted by its flock. Henry scoffed mid-story. Birds don't do that, kid, but her earnestness chipped at his defenses. When she finished, she handed him a blank sheet, her fingers trembling from the neuropathy of vincristine. Your turn. Draw something you miss. Reluctantly, he sketched a rickety bicycle, its lines shaky from disuse and muscle memory long faded. Used to ride this as a kid, he mumbled, tracing the spokes. Best days of my life. Wind in my face, no worries, just pedaling till the sun went down. Maya beamed, her smile a lighthouse in the fog of his regret. See, you got good stuff in there. Hold on to it. Over the next week, Henry found himself returning, grudgingly at first, then eagerly. Maya became his anomaly, a paradox of vitality amid decay. She taught him to fold origami cranes, her fingers deft despite the peripheral nerve damage from her treatments. They say 1,000 cranes grant a wish, she said, holding up a lopsided creation. I'm at 342. Want to help? He folded one, cursing as it crumpled under his stiff hands. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes, and fixed it, her patience unshaken. Their afternoons blurred into a routine, stories, drawings, cranes. One day, she showed him a sketch. Henry pedaling a bike, Maya perched behind, arms outstretched, a field of sunflowers stretching to the horizon. That's us, she said, her voice bright despite the fatigue in her eyes. You're taking me where I've never been. Henry's throat tightened. He hadn't cried since his son, Daniel, walked out at 18, slamming the door on a father too broken to mend. Now, tears pricked his eyes, and he turned away, ashamed of the vulnerability seeping through his cracks. You okay? Maya asked, her voice soft as she reached for his hand, her skin cool against his. Fine, he lied, wiping his face with a sleeve. Just dust in here. She didn't press, just squeezed his hand, a silent tether between their worlds. Their bond deepened with each visit, but joy came with shadows. One afternoon, Maya asked Henry to push her wheelchair to the hospital garden, a rare outing approved by her oncologist despite her plummeting platelet counts. The garden was a modest patch of green, wilting under winter's breath, but to Maya, it was Eden. She tilted her head back, inhaling deeply despite the nasal cannula mirroring Henry's own. Smells like life, she said, closing her eyes. You ever notice how air tastes different outside? Henry shrugged, his oxygen tank humming beside him. Just air to me. She opened her eyes, fixing him with a look that pierced his apathy. That's 'cause you're not tasting it right. Try again, really breathe. He humored her, drawing a slow breath. The cold stung his lungs, but beneath it, he caught a hint of earth, of damp leaves, a whisper of something he'd forgotten. Maybe you're onto something, he conceded. She grinned, triumphant. Told you. Now, tell me about your son. What's he like? The question blindsided him. Daniel? He was a good kid. Smart. Loved building things. Guess he got that from me. Haven't seen him in years. My fault. Maya tilted her head. Why? Got too wrapped up in my own mess after the divorce. Push him away. Last time we talked, he said I was a ghost in his life. He was right. She frowned, then brightened. Ghosts can come back, you know. Write him a letter. Tell him about me. Maybe he'll listen. Henry scoffed, but the seed was planted. That night, alone in his dim apartment, he stared at a blank page, pen hovering. He wrote nothing yet. The illusion of their sanctuary shattered one evening when Henry arrived to find Maya mid-seizure. Her body convulsed, a side effect of intracranial pressure from leukemic infiltration into her central nervous system. Nurses swarmed, barking orders, push lorazepam, stat, get neuro on the line. As monitors screamed a cacophony of alarms. Henry stumbled back, his own breath hitching, oxygen tank forgotten in the chaos. He fled, the image of her frail form burning into his retina like a Polaroid of loss. For days, he avoided her floor. Guilt gnawed at him, a psychological parasite feeding on his cowardice. He lost too much already. Why risk more pain? His emphysema flared, a psychosomatic echo of his turmoil, landing him in the ER with a peak flow reading barely above critical. But on the fourth day, a nurse tracked him down, handing him a note in Maya's jagged scrawl. "Don't be scared, Henry. I'm not mad. Just keep smiling for me." The words were a scalpel, slicing through his self-pity. He returned, finding her weaker but radiant, propped up with pillows, her oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. "Thought you ditched me," she quipped, her voice a rasp. "Almost did," he admitted, voice cracking as he sat beside her. "Couldn't." She squeezed his hand, her grip fragile as a sparrow's wing. "Good. We got cranes to finish. And you owe me a story." He told her about the time he'd built a treehouse for Daniel, a rickety thing that collapsed midsummer, leaving them laughing in the wreckage. Maya giggled, then coughed, a wet sound that made Henry wince. "Sounds like you were a cool dad," she said. "Daniel should know that." Days later, Maya's condition worsened. Her lab showed a white blood cell count spiraling out of control, a hematological storm her body couldn't weather. Yet she rallied for a new project, a memory box for the kids on her ward. "Something to leave behind," she explained, taping photos and drawings to a shoebox. She enlisted Henry, who grumbled but complied, cutting out paper stars while she dictated messages. "Put this one in," she said, handing him a note. "To whoever gets this, you're stronger than you think. Love, Maya." He paused, reading it aloud. "You really believe that?" "Yep. Even you, Henry. You're here, aren't you?" He didn't answer, but his hands kept working, folding stars late into the night as she dozed, her breathing a faint rhythm against the beeping monitors. He finished the box alone, adding a photo he'd snuck of her laughing, a keepsake he couldn't bear to part with. Maya's decline accelerated. Cachexia set in, her body wasting as the cancer consumed her reserves. Her skin stretched taut over bones, a map of resilience etched in every line. Yet she rallied for one last act. With help from a nurse, she organized a party in her room. Juice boxes, paper hats, a playlist of her songs blasted from a portable speaker. Henry arrived to find her propped up, oxygen mask fogging, surrounded by staff and a few young patients, their bald heads gleaming under the lights. "This is my goodbye," she announced, her voice a whisper through the mask. "Not sad, just done for now." She handed Henry a gift, a tiny bicycle crafted from folded paper and tape, its wheels uneven but defiant. "Promise me something," she said, eyes locking with his, sharp despite the morphine glaze. "Live happy. For me." He nodded, tears streaming freely now, no longer hidden. "I promise, kid." Maya died that night, peacefully, as if slipping into a dream. Henry sat by her bed until dawn, the paper bike clutched in his hand, her sunrise sketch glowing in the first light filtering through the blinds. A nurse touched his shoulder, offering coffee he didn't take. He stayed, watching the sun climb, feeling its warmth for the first time in years. Grief carved a hollow in Henry, but Maya's promise anchored him. He volunteered at the hospital, reading to kids in oncology, folding cranes with trembling hands, their chatter filling the silence he'd once craved. One day, he mailed a letter to Daniel. "I'm sorry. I'm trying. Can we talk? There's a girl I want you to know about. She saved me." With Maya's sunflower drawing enclosed. A week later, his son called, voice cautious but warm. They met, tentative but hopeful, on a park bench where Henry once taught him to ride a bike. Daniel brought his daughter, Lily, a 6-year-old with eyes like her grandmother's, and Henry pushed her on a swing, laughing as she squealed. Every morning, Henry watched the sunrise, the paper bicycle on his windowsill catching the light. He started biking again, slowly, wheezing, but free, pedaling through parks where kids waved, their voices echoing Maya's. She'd been right. Life wasn't about how long you had, but how brightly you burned. And in her flicker, he'd found his flame. Sunlit Shadows leaves readers with a resonant truth. Hope isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to find meaning within it. Maya's terminal illness didn't define her. She defined it, turning despair into a canvas of joy, a legacy of stars and cranes. Henry, lost in his own shadows, learned that redemption lies in connection, in choosing to live fully even when the clock ticks louder. The story whispers to us all, no matter how dark the night, we can still chase the dawn, and in doing so, light the way for others.